You know, at 28, I never imagined I'd be defending my life choices to the people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. The decision to be child free wasn't something I made lightly. It came from deep reflection about the life I wanted to create, the impact I hoped to have, and the freedom I knew I needed to achieve my dreams. But in my family, choosing a different path comes with a weight that's sometimes almost unbearable. I can still feel the heaviness in my chest during those family gatherings where the air grows thick with unspoken judgments and pointed comments about my selfish lifestyle. The way my sister's eyes narrow when she looks at my carefully curated wardrobe, or how she scoffs at my career achievements, as if success without children somehow makes them less meaningful. These moments cut deeper than anyone realizes because they come from the people who should understand me the most. What they don't see are the nights I've spent questioning myself, not because I doubt my choices, but because their disapproval forces me to constantly defend the authenticity of my happiness. I've built a life that fills me with purpose, a successful career as a marketing director, the ability to help others in ways they'll never know, and yes, the financial freedom that comes with my choices. But somehow, in their eyes, none of this matters without following their prescribed path of marriage and motherhood. I quote. They always believe that family means supporting each other's dreams, even when they look different from our own. The irony is that while they accuse me of being selfish, I've silently carried burdens they couldn't imagine, helping in ways that go unnoticed, because I never wanted recognition, just the peace of knowing I could make a difference. Let me share with you a story that brought all of these tensions to a breaking point, a story about expectations, entitlement, and the true meaning of family support.
Because sometimes the hardest part isn't making your own choices, it's standing firm in them when the people you love try to make you doubt everything you've built. Growing up with my sister was like watching two paths diverge in slow motion. We were close once, sharing secrets and dreams in our childhood bedroom, but life had different plans for us. I still remember the day she announced her first pregnancy at 22. Her eyes sparkled with joy while mine reflected uncertainty about my own different choices. As the years passed, our lives became a stark contrast. While she embraced motherhood, having three beautiful children in quick succession, I pursued my career with unwavering determination. Every promotion I earned, every milestone I reached in becoming a marketing director seemed to drive a deeper wedge between us. I'd catch her glancing at my new car or hearing whispers about my vacations. Her expression a mixture of longing and something darker. The weight of her resentment grew heavier with each passing year. I'd visit my nieces and nephews, bringing gifts and trying to be the best aunt possible, but there was always tension simmering beneath the surface. Must be nice, she'd say, watching me check my work emails on my latest iPhone. Some of us have real responsibilities. Those words would cut deep, despite my understanding of her struggles with daycare costs and endless bills. What tears at my heart most is how our family dynamics shifted. Every gathering became a subtle battlefield of expectations. Mom would highlight my sister's sacrifices as a mother while pointedly asking when I'd settle down. The unspoken message was clear. My success somehow diminished my sister's choices, my freedom an affront to her challenges. I've watched her juggle three kids' schedules, stretch every dollar, and exhaust herself trying to be everything to everyone. Yes, I have more financial flexibility, but what they don't see are the lonely nights I spend working late, the relationships I've put on hold, the different kind of sacrifices I've made. My path isn't easier, it's just different. Looking back now, I realize that money was never really the issue. It was about validation, about different definitions of fulfillment, about the stories we tell ourselves about success and happiness. Sometimes the hardest part of staying true to yourself is weathering the storm of others' expectations, even when those others are the people you love most. I never imagined my sister's bridal shower would become the breaking point in our relationship, But looking back, I should have seen the storm clouds gathering. The weeks leading up to the event were filled with an electric tension that made every family dinner feel like walking through a minefield. I'd catch her glancing at my designer purse or making pointed comments about my recent vacation photos on social media. Each interaction was loaded with unspoken accusations about my lifestyle choices. The morning of the shower, I arrived early to help set up at my mother's house, my heart genuinely full of hope that today would be different. I'd carefully selected a thoughtful gift and even splurged on custom decorations to make her day special. The venue looked beautiful, soft pink roses scattered across white linen tablecloths, champagne flutes catching the morning light, and a carefully arranged gift table that would soon overflow with presents. But beneath the picture perfect surface, I could feel the familiar undercurrent of resentment. As guests arrived, I watched my sister hold court, radiant in her pre wedding glow, accepting congratulations and showing off her engagement ring. I kept busy, making sure everyone had drinks, taking photos, doing everything I could to be the supportive sister I wanted to be.
But every time our eyes met, I saw that familiar flash of judgment, that silent calculation of what I had versus what she thought I owed her. The tension reached its peak during the gift opening ceremony.
Each present she unwrapped seemed to add another brick to the wall between us. I noticed how she glanced at me after opening particularly expensive gifts, her expression growing increasingly tight. My stomach churned with anxiety, knowing that somehow, some way, this carefully orchestrated celebration was about to derail. The air in the room grew thick with anticipation, and I could feel my hands trembling slightly as she reached for the next gift. What happened next would shatter not just the peaceful facade of the shower, but the very foundation of our relationship. Sometimes the hardest moments in life come wrapped in beautiful packaging, just like the gifts surrounding my sister that day. But they teach us invaluable lessons about standing our ground and protecting our truth, even when it means facing the disapproval of those we love most. I never imagined my sister's bridal shower would become the stage for such a devastating betrayal. The room was filled with cheerful chatter and the soft clink of champagne glasses when my world suddenly tilted on its axis. My sister, glowing in her pre-wedding happiness, stood up to make what I thought would be a typical thank you speech. But what came next shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. "And I want to give a special thank you to my sister," she announced, her voice dripping with an expectation that made my stomach turn. "Who's gifting us our dream honeymoon to Bora Bora?" The room erupted in applause while I sat there, frozen, my mind struggling to process what was happening. $8,500. She had just voluntarily committed my money, my hard-earned money, without even asking me. The silence that followed my confused "what" was deafening.
I watched as my sister's face transformed from triumphant to angry, her words cutting through me like shards of glass. Hey, don't act surprised. You're selfish. You don't have kids to spend money on. What else are you doing with your money? Each word felt like a physical blow, each syllable laced with years of hidden resentment. That what hurt most wasn't just the public ambush or the entitled demand, it was watching my mother nod in agreement. Her words, "family helps family," echoing in my ears like a cruel joke. They had no idea about the sacrifices I was already making, the monthly mortgage payments I'd been quietly handling for our parents, never seeking recognition or praise. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I gathered my dignity and stood up, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "No," I said simply, turning to leave as the whispers started. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the hardest part of loving yourself is knowing when to walk away, even from family. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and the painful recognition that sometimes those closest to us can be the ones who understand us least. Standing firm in your truth isn't easy, especially when family pressure threatens to break you. But I've learned that self respect must come first, even when it feels like you're standing alone. I sat there frozen in disbelief as my sister's words echoed through the suddenly silent room. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and my hands were trembling under the table. $8,500. The audacity of her demand hit me like a physical blow. But what hurt even more was the cruel assumption that my life had less value, simply because I chose not to have children. You know that moment when everything around you seems to slow down, and you can feel every emotion coursing through your body. That's where I was.
The rage built up inside me like a pressure cooker, but alongside it was this profound sadness. Here was my own sister, someone I grew up with, someone I loved, publicly trying to shame me into submission, and my mother's words, family helps family, cut deeper than any knife could, because they didn't know how much I was already silently carrying for our family. I looked around the room at the faces of our relatives and friends, some awkwardly avoiding eye contact, others nodding in agreement with my sister's demands. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Not because you're weak, but because you respect yourself too much to let anyone, even family, dictate your worth based on your life choices. As I stood up, my legs shaking but my resolve firm, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. Years of subtle jabs about my child-free lifestyle, the constant implications that my money wasn't really mine because I didn't have real responsibilities. It all crystallized into this defining moment. I didn't slam doors or make a scene. I simply gathered my things, held my head high, and left. Let me tell you something I've learned through all of this. Your boundaries aren't up for public debate, and your life choices don't need anyone's approval. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight aren't against enemies, but against the expectations of those closest to us. Standing firm in your truth, even when your voice shakes, that's where real strength lies. And if you're facing similar pressure to conform to someone else's vision of how you should live or spend your money, remember your path is yours alone to walk. After leaving the bridal shower, I felt a storm of emotions crashing through me. The audacity of my sister's public demand still rang in my ears, but what came next truly showed me how deep this entitled behavior ran.
There, lighting up my phone screen, was a Venmo request for $8,500, complete with crying emojis, as if they could somehow manipulate me into submission. In that moment, something inside me shifted irreversibly. I sat in my car staring at that request and thought about all the times I'd swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. The countless occasions where my choices were questioned, where my lifestyle was diminished simply because it didn't match their definition of fulfillment.
My hands were trembling, not from anger anymore, but from a profound realization. This was my moment to break this pattern once and for all. You know what's fascinating about family dynamics? How we often confuse love with obligation, how boundaries get blurred until they disappear entirely. As I contemplated my response, I thought about the irony of being labeled selfish while secretly carrying my parents' mortgage, never breathing a word about it to anyone. The weight of that secret pressed against my chest, but it wasn't mine to weaponize. Instead, I chose something simpler but infinitely more powerful. 1 penny, just 1 cent, with those 3 words, for your thoughts. It wasn't spite that drove me. It was a declaration of my worth, my right to make decisions about my own money, my own life. Each click as I entered that transaction felt like breaking another link in the chain of emotional manipulation that had bound me for so long. You see, sometimes the smallest gestures carry the biggest messages. That penny wasn't just spare change. It was my line in the sand, my voice finally rising above the chorus of family helps family that had been used to silence my own needs for so long. And as I hit send, I felt something powerful, the liberation that comes with finally standing in your truth, unapologetically and completely. Dot. Let me ask you, how many times have you dimmed your light to make others comfortable? How often have you sacrificed your boundaries in the name of keeping peace? Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply say no, stand firm, and let the consequences unfold as they may. Because your worth isn't measured by how much you give into others' demands. It's measured by how true you stay to yourself. Dot. When I sent that penny, I never expected the tsunami of rage that would follow. My phone exploded with notifications, texts, calls, and voicemails, each one more venomous than the last. My sister's reaction was nuclear. How dare you mock me like this? She screamed through the phone. You heartless, selfish witch. You sit there in your perfect little life while I struggle every single day with 3 kids. I sat there, my hands trembling as I held my phone, each word cutting deeper than she could know. The irony of being called selfish while secretly carrying my parents' mortgage weighed heavily on my heart. But I couldn't tell her that, wouldn't tell her that. This wasn't about proving my worth through my financial sacrifices. Dot. Her words kept coming like daggers aimed at every life choice I'd ever made. You're just a lonely, bitter woman who'll never know real love or responsibility. The pain in her voice was real, but so was the entitlement. I found myself questioning everything. Had I been too harsh? Was the penny too provocative? But then I remembered how she tried to publicly shame me at her bridal shower, how she'd attempted to force my hand with that Venmo request. In that moment, I realized something profound about family dynamics and the toxic expectations we sometimes carry. My sister wasn't just asking for money. She was demanding validation for her life choices while invalidating mine. The penny wasn't just about the money, it was about standing up for myself, about saying no to the narrative that my life was somehow less valuable because I chose differently. Dot. Every tear I shed that night wasn't just about her reaction, it was years of pent up frustration finally breaking through. I've learned that sometimes the hardest part of loving your family is setting boundaries, even when it hurts, because at the end of the day, respect isn't something you can buy with a honeymoon to Bora Bora. It's something that needs to be given freely without conditions or price tags. This moment wasn't just about a penny or even about $8,500. It was about standing firm in your truth, even when the whole world seems to be pushing against you. Sometimes the smallest actions can trigger the biggest revelations about who we are and what we're willing to accept in our relationships. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd been carrying a weight far heavier than their accusations. For 2 years, I'd been silently supporting our parents, paying their mortgage month after month after Dad lost his job. I remember that devastating phone call, hearing the tremor in my father's voice as he tried to maintain his dignity while telling me about the layoffs. In that moment, I didn't hesitate. I couldn't quote T. Dot every month. As I transferred the money, I thought about how my parents had always been there for us, working extra shifts, sacrificing their own dreams to give us opportunities. My father, who never missed a single one of my school events, now struggled to meet my eyes when I visited, the shame of unemployment eating away at his spirit. My mother, always so proud and strong, trying to hide her worry behind forced smiles.
How could I not step in? I kept it secret, not because I wanted recognition, but because I understood something my sister never seemed to grasp. True family support isn't about demanding or expecting, it's about giving without announcement, loving without conditions. While she screamed about my disposable income and childless lifestyle,
I was quietly ensuring our parents wouldn't lose their home, the place where we grew up, where all our childhood memories lived. The irony of being called selfish while shouldering this responsibility alone wasn't lost on me. Every time my sister complained about my lifestyle or demanded expensive gifts, I bit my tongue, knowing that the truth would only hurt our parents more. They didn't need to feel like a burden. They'd given us enough. Sometimes love means carrying the weight alone, being the villain in someone else's story, while quietly being the hero in another. This experience taught me that real strength isn't in how loudly you can demand help, but in how silently you can offer it. Sometimes the most powerful acts of love are the ones that remain unseen, unspoken, but deeply felt. And while others might judge our choices from the outside, only we know the true depth of our sacrifices and the real meaning of family loyalty. The morning of my sister's wedding arrived with a weight I hadn't anticipated. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my dress and trying to calm my racing thoughts, I couldn't help but feel the emotional turbulence brewing inside me. This day should have been purely about joy and celebration, but the recent confrontations about money and expectations had cast a shadow over what should have been a perfect family moment. I remember taking deep breaths as I drove to the venue, my hands gripping the steering wheel a bit tighter than necessary. The secret I'd been carrying about helping our parents felt particularly heavy that day. For 2 years, I'd silently shouldered the responsibility of their mortgage payments, finding deep purpose in protecting their dignity during dad's unemployment. Yet here I was, branded as the selfish sister who wouldn't fund an extravagant honeymoon. Walking into the beautifully decorated church, I felt a mix of pride and anxiety wash over me. The flowers were stunning, the music was perfect, and guests were arriving with bright smiles and warm embraces. But beneath the surface of this picturesque scene, I could feel the undercurrent of tension. Every time I caught my sister's eye during the preparations, there was a coldness there that broke my heart a little more. The thing about family celebrations is that they have a way of bringing everything to the surface. Every unspoken word, every hidden resentment, every buried secret. As I watched my sister being transformed into a bride, I couldn't shake the feeling that this day would change everything. Not just because of her marriage, but because sometimes the truth has a way of finding its own moment to emerge. What pained me most wasn't the money she demanded or even her harsh words. It was the realization that somewhere along the way, we'd lost the ability to see each other's hearts. While she saw my childless status as a ticket to endless disposable income, she never stopped to consider that my choices might include sacrifices and responsibilities of my own. Standing there surrounded by the swirling excitement of wedding preparations, I found myself hoping that somehow today would bring understanding rather than more division. Because in the end, family isn't about who can give what, it's about supporting each other through the visible and invisible struggles we all face. I never expected my private acts of kindness to be exposed in such a dramatic way. As my uncle stood there, glass raised for his wedding speech, my heart stopped when he suddenly shifted from typical wedding pleasantries to something much more personal. And let me say something about family, he announced, his voice carrying across the reception hall. Some people show their love quietly, like our dear marketing director here, who's been secretly paying her parents' mortgage for 2 years, while the rest of us had no idea. The room fell silent. I felt the blood drain from my face as every eye turned toward me. This wasn't how I wanted people to find out. I'd kept it private because that's what felt right, helping my parents through their struggles without making a show of it. But now, in this moment, everything was laid bare. I watched as my sister's face transformed. The color drained from her cheeks, and her previously confident posture crumbled. The same woman who had demanded thousands for her honeymoon just weeks ago now looked like she'd seen a ghost. The realization of her own entitled behavior crashed over her like a wave, and I could see the shame written across her features. The reactions around the room were a symphony of gasps and whispers. My mother's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Dad looked down at his plate, emotion evident in his trembling hands. Some relatives nodded in understanding, finally seeing the full picture of who I really was, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, perhaps reconsidering their previous judgments. In that moment, I felt a complex mix of emotions wash over me: embarrassment at having my private generosity exposed, vindication as my true character was revealed, and a deep sadness that it took this dramatic revelation for some family members to see beyond their assumptions about my child-free lifestyle. This experience taught me something profound about authenticity and judgment. Sometimes our quietest acts of love speak the loudest, and those who judge us most harshly often know the least about our true hearts. If you're out there facing similar judgments or carrying the weight of silent sacrifices, remember that your worth isn't measured by others' demands, but by the integrity of your choices and the authenticity of your care for others. In the days following my sister's wedding, I found myself at the center of an emotional hurricane that swept through our entire family. The revelation of my financial support for our parents created ripples I never expected to face. You know that moment when a long held secret finally breaks free? That's exactly what happened, and the aftermath was both liberating and devastating. I watched as family members who had previously pressured me about the honeymoon money began approaching me with tear filled eyes and apologetic embraces. My Aunt Sarah, who had initially sided with my sister, pulled me aside during the reception and whispered, "I had no idea you were carrying such a burden alone. We've all been so wrong about you." Those words cut deep into my heart, not because I wanted recognition, but because they highlighted how quick people are to judge without knowing the full story. Not everyone's perspective shifted. Some relatives, particularly those closest to my sister, doubled down on their stance. "You could have helped with both," they'd say, completely missing the point that it was never about the money. It was about respect, boundaries, and the audacity of demanding someone else's hard-earned savings. I remember standing in my parents' kitchen the day after the wedding, listening to various family members debate my choices, as if I wasn't even there, my emotions swinging between vindication and exhaustion. The most profound impact wasn't just the divided opinions, it was watching the family dynamics I'd known my entire life suddenly shift and realign. Relationships that I thought were solid began to crack, while unexpected allies emerged from the woodwork. Through it all, I maintained my silence, letting the truth speak for itself, because sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply standing firm in your truth. What I've learned through this experience and what I want to share with you is that doing the right thing quietly doesn't make it any less right. Our worth isn't measured by how loudly we announce our good deeds, but by the integrity of our actions when no one's watching. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones where we have to stand alone, trusting that the truth will eventually surface. Your journey might look different from mine, but remember this: your boundaries are negotiable, and your choices don't need anyone else's approval. Stand firm in your truth, even when the storm rages around you. Because in the end, it's not about winning arguments. It's about maintaining your dignity and self respect while building a legacy of genuine, unconditional support. In the days following the wedding, my phone lit up with messages from my sister. Each notification brought a mix of exhaustion and that familiar ache in my chest. I've spent years carrying the weight of others' expectations, silently supporting our family while being labeled as the selfish one. Now, as I read through her apologies, I can't help but reflect on how differently things could have been if she'd simply asked instead of demanded. The hardest part isn't the past hurt, it's wrestling with forgiveness while protecting my own peace. One morning, as I sat with my coffee, staring at yet another lengthy text from her, I felt tears welling up, not from sadness, but from a profound realization. I'd spent so long trying to prove my worth to someone who never truly saw me. The irony of being called selfish while secretly paying our parents' mortgage wasn't lost on me. When we finally met face to face at a local cafe, her eyes were different, humbled, perhaps for the first time. She spoke of shame, of realizing how her assumptions about my life had blinded her to my humanity. But as I listened, I knew this wasn't just about money or a honeymoon. It was about respect, about acknowledging that my choices, including being child free, don't make me less worthy of dignity. I shared with her how deeply it hurt to be valued only for what I could provide, not for who I am. The conversation was raw, uncomfortable, but necessary. I explained that while I could forgive her, our relationship needed to change fundamentally. No more expectations, no more entitlement, no more judgments about my lifestyle choices. This journey has taught me something powerful. Sometimes the strongest form of love is setting firm boundaries. To those watching who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, remember this: your worth isn't measured by what you give, but by who you are. Stand firm in your truth, even when it feels lonely. Your choices, your path, your boundaries, they're all valid. We're all writing our own stories, and sometimes the most challenging chapters lead to the most meaningful growth. Whether you're the one who gives in silence or the one fighting for recognition, know that your journey matters. Let's create legacies built on mutual respect, understanding, and the courage to be authentically ourselves. Through this journey with my sister, I've learned that the most profound lessons often come wrapped in our most challenging moments. Standing in the aftermath of everything that happened, I feel both a deep sadness and an unwavering certainty that I did what was right. You see, this wasn't just about money or a honeymoon to Bora Bora. It was about something far more fundamental: the right to make our own choices and have them respected. For years, I carried the weight of others' judgments about my child-free lifestyle, quietly supporting our family while enduring criticism about my supposed selfishness. The irony wasn't lost on me: being called selfish while secretly paying our parents' mortgage, never seeking recognition or praise. But that moment at the wedding, when the truth finally emerged, wasn't about vindication. It was about authenticity breaking through the surface of assumptions. What I've come to understand with crystal clarity is that our worth isn't measured by how much we conform to others' expectations. My path might look different from my sister's, but it's no less valid, no less meaningful. I've learned that true family support isn't about demanding or entitlement. It's about understanding, respect, and acknowledging each other's choices. To everyone watching who's ever felt pressured to justify their life choices, I want you to hear this: your path is yours to choose. Whether you're child free, choosing an unconventional career, or living life differently from your family's expectations, you have the right to stand firm in your decisions. Your legacy isn't built on meeting others' demands, it's created through staying true to yourself and your values. This experience has taught me that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for maintaining healthy relationships and self-respect. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to stand firm in our truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The real measure of our character isn't in how much we give when demanded, but in how authentically we live our values. I encourage you to reflect on your own journey. What boundaries do you need to set? What truth are you afraid to stand up for? Remember, Every time you honor your authentic self, you're not just building your own legacy, you're giving permission for others to do the same. Let's create a world where we celebrate our differences instead of demanding conformity, where we support each other's choices instead of judging them. Your story, your choices, your path, they all matter. Stand strong in your truth and let that be the legacy you leave behind.